So we went through an exercise to help that individual get some clarity. And we map it out in a framework. We kind of define what the goals are for their organization and for their team. And I have found that having that clarity helps the individual leader. So it frees up bandwidth for them. It helps take a load off.
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with the customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Dr. Carla Fowler. Dr. Fowler is an MD, PhD, and elite executive coach. For the last decade, she has been a secret weapon for scores of CEOs, entrepreneurs, and other senior leaders. Carla's unique approach combines the latest research from performance science with timeless best practices to help top performers level up and achieve their goals. Carla graduated from Brown University magna cum laude, earned her MD and PhD at the University of Washington, and completed her internship in general surgery at Stanford University. Congrats on being a secret weapon for senior leaders, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you, Karl. It's great to be having this conversation.
Thanks. So when I heard performance science, like a lot of people, I immediately thought of individual performance, but I'd love to discuss with you how performance science can improve collaboration and connection among teams.
Yeah, well, Karl, I think you brought up such a great point in our pre-show talk. And I often hear this from other people as well. Sometimes we hear performance science, and we immediately get sort of our shoulders tense, and we get, we think of performance reviews. We think of oh, am I being judged? Or how do I compete with everyone and end up on top, right? Very individualistic. And something I love to share about performance science is that my interest in it has a lot to do with just the fact that I think as human beings, we want to grow and change, that we feel good when we overcome a challenge, that there's something in learning about performance science that is very sort of pro-human. It doesn't take the humanity out of us. It's actually really an important part of how we feel satisfaction and confidence and a sense of self-efficacy. And notably, when we start to think about relating to each other, how we feel about even that individual self-efficacy is really important, right? In terms of how we relate to other people. But you brought it even a level further, which is to say, how does it help us, as teams, or as a leader, how does thinking about performance science help us? So this is definitely a topic of fascination for me. And, there are a couple of ways just to dive right in that thinking about performance science can help us. One of the first ones, so I always break performance science down into different buckets. I think there are 4 buckets. Very quickly, we can think about the strategy, what do we think is most important that we're going to do? What are the things that are all the things we're not going to do? I think there's execution, right? How do we get ourselves or our teams all operating in sync once we've figured out what are the objectives we want to achieve? Third bucket is really about the mindset and the psychology of a team, right? Is a team feeling confident? Are they feeling motivated? How are we dealing with the uncertainty that comes into day-to-day work? And then I think the fourth bucket is actually about our physiology, literally our biology, because we know that our brains and our bodies are not separate. And when we're stressed, for example, hormone signals can really change our decision-making. So there's a whole physiology bucket. And so one of the first things I think about, which was really surprising to me when I started coaching, was the impact. Let's just take that first bucket of strategy. How clear are we as a leader, for example, on what our objectives are, what's most important, what are the most important priorities. So this is a principle of performance that as an individual, it's important. And certainly as a leader, it's important to have some clarity about, okay, what are we trying to achieve? what are the priorities we should focus our resources on? But notably, I had a client, and I come back to this story again and again because it really surprised me in my early coaching days. So we went through an exercise to help that individual get some clarity. And we map it out in a framework. We kind of define what the goals are for their organization and for their team. And I have found that having that clarity helps the individual leader. So it frees up bandwidth for them. It helps take a load off. But what was interesting was this leader actually took the framework we built, brought it back to their team, and showed it to them. I didn't instruct this person to do that. They just really wanted to share it. And he came back and was like, Carla, something really incredible happened. So his team just like lit up. And we're asking questions about the framework and saying, okay, why is this a priority? Oh, they were mapping themselves back to priorities. So like, oh, priority number 2, that's me. That's my role. That's my function. And then they said, hey, we want to make frameworks for like our roles for like what, each person's individual contribution was. So the surprise was that we had been operating in this one bucket of performance science, sort of the strategy bucket, like get mental clarity, know what you're aiming at, know what's most important. But then what happened was we actually ended up in a totally different bucket in the results. The team got super motivated. And so this is one of those interesting things about performance science is, number one, different things are connected in interesting ways. And so one of the interesting lessons I learned was that your team needs to know how to win. Like part of how performance can help a team feel connected and motivated is when they actually know, what are we trying to do? Like, where's the field? What's on the field? How do we play together? What is each of our contributions? Why do we matter? And, when we have to make choices, how are we going to prioritize those choices, when resources are limited?
I think that's a brilliant lesson for leaders out there. And it's such an interesting, like you said, aha moment of when you went from just focusing on what the leader was trying to do to get clarity for themselves. When they shared that with the team, it made not just the understanding of how good the plan was better because it got better input, right, but also it that motivational factor and helping people, the team, make better decisions. It would also, I'd imagine, lead to faster and more productive time being spent because there's less time micromanaging or guiding people because they already knew what they were aiming for and how they fit into the larger goal or the larger effort of the team. And so the leader could trust their team to do the right thing because one, they knew how they fit, but also they were empowered to move the team forward without having to be constantly checked in on or course corrected.
Yes.
Like so many companies get burdened down with, and what so many employees resent because they don't feel like they're being trusted or given autonomy over their own daily work schedules, that sort of thing. And so I can see how, from the leader's perspective, one, they get that mental clarity and free up their like in a headspace to do other things. They feel more connected with their team feels more connected with them, and they also have more time because they're spending less time micromanaging and doing more time actually leading, which is just this compound bonus that I'm sure when they started that initial exercise you weren't expecting to see that. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought up this point about like micromanaging. So let's do another example, like another story of like, okay, let's take the execution bucket of performance science. You need to get your team kind of like aligned and working well together. And certainly I spend a good amount of time talking with leaders who might, or let's say someone moved from an individual contributor role to being like a manager or a leader. Mm-hmm. But even once you go up to like that executive level, suddenly you might be overseeing so much that like you cannot do all those things anymore. And this is a transition that is hard, but like on a successful leadership pathway, everyone goes through it. And so I spend a good amount of time talking about how to free up bandwidth for individuals so that they can do some of that higher level strategic work, whether that's fundraising for their company, whether that is, strategic planning. So we talk about this, and so we talk about delegation and all of these things. One of the really interesting perspectives that comes back to this, where we work on something for the individual, but then it actually has this tremendous team benefit, is so for example, I had a client who was working to scale their organization, and we're having a lot of success, but literally they're trying to scale like their org to keep up with that success and take advantage of that momentum in the market. And so we were talking a lot about delegation, and as you know, delegation, you actually sometimes have to like train people to receive like the new task, because it's not just handing something off and expecting it to work. And so we spent a lot of time talking about this. But one of the angles I like to frame it as is we are both freeing up bandwidth for you as a leader, but also know that when you do an activity that someone else on your team could do, you are actually taking the opportunity for them to learn and grow. And one of the interesting things about performance is that we as human beings want to have opportunities to stretch. And not every person on your team has the same dreams and goals for what direction they want to go, or what kinds of growth or tasks are interesting to them. But that is something worth having a conversation about. And so this is one of these interesting areas where, to scale your org, you as a leader cannot be doing all of those tasks, but also it's really important for everyone on your team to feel like there is a place for them to grow, to take on more, to be able to contribute more, to create more opportunities for themselves. And so this is another piece of leading a team well that has two benefits that are totally aligned. But it's fun when we can position them from the standpoint of, in the execution bucket, like people want to be learning and growing, building their capacity. And also in the execution bucket, as a leader, you got to figure out how to scale yourself. And so again, this really great alignment that when we look at it from a performance science standpoint, you can see how there's like this double benefit.
Yeah, and I can see how, especially when someone's trying to scale a company, you can't do it all. There's only so much time and only so much, like you said, bandwidth and expertise. And if you're going to be scaling up your team, giving them the opportunities to grow with the company is what's necessary, because if your team doesn't improve, then you're not really scaling properly. You're not going to be able to achieve or overcome the obstacles that come with scaling. So it takes that individual performance and again makes it a team building exercise or team building impact when you communicate and get your team involved that way. So it's interesting how that I like how you drew the parallel between the two examples of one bucket kind of expanding into another one when it comes to communicating it with the team properly. So if someone is trying to scale and like wants to get started on improving their applying performance science to their activities, to their habits, what's kind of a first step they can take that will help them see some results?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think one of the most like immediately sort of pliable tools that I recommend to everyone is like, we need some time to think. I think like it's important to actually like block some time on your calendar to think. You could think of this as like time to get organized, but I think one of the most important things is to actually start with that mental clarity exercise to say, what am I trying to do? It could be with your business as a whole, it could be with a piece of your business, but to trying to actually translate into words, what are you trying to accomplish? And what is actually going to be most important for that? Because I think when you start in that spot, you then you set other things up for success. So for example, you are in position to communicate that to your team. So your team can actually get on board with you, and you might even get feedback from them or new ideas or better ideas about like how to think about it. So I think that's one offshoot of that. Another offshoot of that thinking time is that it allows you to start to say, also, where else could my team be helping me, right? What conversations should I be having with team members to think about, okay, how could we grow into this area? Is this an area you are interested in? Like how might the direction the company needs to go align with things you personally want, like would fulfill you or would be purposeful for you, or things you feel really confident at? So for example, I had a client situation recently where it was identified that like there was a team member who like in their role was doing okay, but that actually had a tremendous number of skills that would be really useful to the team in another arena. And so it was just a question of like fit of role. But like, again, if you know where you want to go and what's most important for that, you can start to then think through, okay, how do I line up the team both in a way that they're motivated for, but also that really helps us in the right direction. So I think that I often come back to, we need some time to think and plan. And it's often an overlooked, it can feel like a luxury, but I think it's actually critical.
100% agree. I think in general, the pace of business, or the pace people think business needs to move at, they need to be moving at, is faster than our brains are capable of handling. If you try and push and push and push and go faster and faster and faster, then you miss a lot of things, and things start the wheels start falling off the car because you're not able to think enough. There's not enough time to think and plan and this whole exercise you just described. If you stop doing that, you'll soon find you're way off course, or you've blown past a goal, or what you thought was what you wanted really isn't anymore. But since you aren't taking the time to be mindful and think and strategize and plan, that you don't really even know what you're aiming at anymore. And if the leader doesn't know, then that ripples out through the entire team, and everything starts falling apart. And so and I've talked with other people on the show before about the importance of slowing down in order to speed up. If you're trying to speed up your growth, if you're trying to achieve more success, oftentimes, and it seems counterintuitive in today's kind of business world, is pause and slow down and think some more and take time to communicate and bond with your team. And when you do that, a lot of things that are stressing out or unclear will suddenly you'll have like crystallized aha moments of, oh my gosh, I totally understand what we need to do now. And you can move forward with a lot more confidence and be a lot more successful because you took the time to pause. And so many teams and businesses just think they have to keep like pedal to the metal and just go, go, go. And it's not realistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love how you put that often we need to think about pacing, and that we can sort of get over the tips of our skis if we're executing without an underlying foundation of thinking ahead enough to really like line ourselves up, both for energy and sustainability, right, to avoid burnout, but also to just be strategically thinking ahead enough that we're not just constantly reacting.
Yeah, because I think there's a difference between, people think there's a lot going on they have to react to, but there's a difference between reacting and responding involves some thought and planning and strategy, and reacting is just emotional, oh my gosh, and just you're kind of flailing. Mm-hmm. And that flailing, again, is not sustainable, and it's rarely going to lead to the drastic growth and success that they think it will. Whereas taking a time to pause and respond thoughtfully and strategically leads to much better results.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Carla. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Carla, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.